Is the role of the state becoming obsolete as multinational corporations influence government policy? Or is the role becoming more salient as nations squabble over economic power through government policy on innovation, currency value, and minerals associated with energy security?
Well, there's no question that the role of government is and will remain important for as far as the eye can see. Milton Friedman said in Capitalism and Freedom almost 50 years ago that the appropriate role of government is to regulate the way business is conducted. It has to define the playing field, it has to determine the rules of the game under which they compete. We've evolved a lot in the last 50 years, and I don't think anybody questions the importance of government regulation. The new issues that are coming out today in this field are in fact illustrated, I think, dramatically by the recent financial difficulties that started in the U.S. and certainly involved an awful lot of other financial institutions around the world who did many of the same things that the U.S. financial institutions did. And that is that the situation is so complex that government has a hard time doing a good job of regulating. Mm-hmm. And it's becoming an issue of competence of government. Is the government up to the task? And that's a function of both the complexity of the task and also the capability of the people who are brought to the task. And the government, as everybody knows, governments around the world, but certainly in this country, have a great deal of difficulty competing for talent with the private sector, just because the compensation differences are so great and the way society views the different jobs, the psychic income that used to be part of working in the government has been degraded enormously in this country. Very few high talent young people go into government anymore, whereas when John Kennedy was president, that's what half the talented people, young people in this country wanted to do. Mm. So things have changed dramatically in that regard. It doesn't mean that the role of government is unimportant, but it does mean we may have to find new mechanisms. And I think the financial crisis or the financial turmoil is a good example of that. I'm very skeptical that we will ever be able to regulate well the complexities of some of the products and relationships that exist in the financial sector. However, we know now, and we should have known before, and Keynes would have told us we should know, that there's just a lot we don't know and never will know, and that there will be a lot of mistakes made. And humans are humans, and some of our blue chip institutions with some of the most talented products of our vaulted education system have made some of the dumbest mistakes you could imagine, mm-hmm. at least in retrospect, mm-hmm. that have triggered this financial difficulty. So I think from all this, it's safe to conclude mistakes are going to be made. And in some industries, in particular the financial services industry, those mistakes have great penalties.
For all of society.
Not just for those involved in the financial service mm-hmm. industry, but for everybody in mm-hmm. society, as you say. And so we've got to find new mechanisms. And in fact, it's encouraging to me that we are. I mean, mm-hmm. this just last week announced Basel Accord is clearly the kind of response to this situation that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is consistent. Well, we can't tell when mistakes are going to be made. Regulators are not going to be able to stop them. They're going to happen. But what we're going to do is force new conditions on these institutions so when they make the mistakes, they will not have the dire consequences on them and on the rest of society. So they just basically have to have enough money in the bank so that no matter how big a mistake they make, they can pay for it.
So the principal agent problem they're hoping will no longer happen, where these companies will see the risk before them, the condition will be laid out where they will take 100% of the risk, whereas we saw what has happened previously, government, taxpayers by fault of the system, took a lot of this risk on.
Absolutely, and so in this case, the institutions themselves would essentially use their own money in the reserves to make up for their mistakes. Now, of course, you can always worry that, okay, well, now the innovative, clever, young bankers are going to say, well, we've got more money in the bank, so we can take even more risks. So we'll figure out even more risky products to go into. So this is a never-ending iterative game that goes on. But it's clear government has a role here in one way or another, and the concern is, can government keep up? And it's more not a question whether they have a role, but whether they have the competence and the capability to fulfill that role.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Lewis. It's always great to chat with you about all of these amazing, interesting topics. Thank you so much for coming today.
Well, you know, the Chinese have the curse, may you live in interesting times. I don't view that as a curse. I think it's great. I mean, it makes life worth living, and I enjoy talking about these things with you.
Great.